Toronto stats came out for the month of March, and this might be one of the most difficult stats to break down that we've seen in a long time. There are probably 3 or 4 different ways that you can take the numbers and spin them however you like. So let's break down why that is and actually discuss what's been happening in the Toronto real estate market. I'm Mike Ouzas. I'm a realtor here in Toronto. If you ever want to book in a call with me to discuss what exactly is happening in your market or your micro market that you're looking to move into, you can click on that first link in the description down below and book and call with me anytime. The numbers for March came out, and needless to say, they were a little bit underwhelming compared to some of the news articles we saw and what we've been seeing on the ground level in the past 30 days or so. The month of March presented a few different things that I think are extremely notable as we take a look at these numbers. The first one was March break was the middle of the month, and in general, March break is kind of the start of the spring market, which gets things rolling through Easter, which is typically sometime in the middle of April. This year, Easter was at the end of March, which also kept that gap between March break and Easter very tight. Now, between those weeks, we also had a private school March break sandwiched in the middle. Essentially, we had March break, private school March break, and Easter all back to back to back. The sentiment from sellers in that time period was to wait until after April, and I do have some data from this week that I've been seeing, and some things have definitely stood out since the start of April. Hint, hint, we have seen a lot of inventory come to market this week. On the buy side, I have also been working with buyers, and the sentiment among buyers is, where is the inventory throughout the month of March? Even though there were a good amount of active listings, we didn't see all that inventory in the pockets that needed them the most, and the properties that did come to market in those areas definitely saw a lot of activity, especially when it comes to offer night. I did hear of some properties getting almost 100 showings, over 100 people through their open houses, and double-digit multiple offers on offer night, selling for a number much higher than the previous comparable even a month before. With all that being said, let's take a look at what those numbers look like and discuss why the media can spin this however they want, because there's a few different things to take a look at. The first article we'll take a look at here, Better Dwelling, and this one says that Toronto real estate prices surged despite fewest sales since 2009. Taking a look at home sales, we did see one of the slowest months of March since 2009, and I do believe that that's attributed to what we discussed on the different March breaks and Easter being so early this year. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. Average sale price, 1.12 million, which is up about 1.3% from March of 2023. And this is a notable number, as we'll see in a moment. Active listings up 23%, and total number of sales down 4.5%. Interestingly enough, the months of inventory down to 1.9. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you'll know that months of inventory is the key metric that I've been watching as a leading indicator onto where pricing is going. Anything at 2 or less typically signals a very competitive market, and that's generally when we start to see bidding wars across the board. Essentially, what 2 months of inventory means is 1 out of 2 properties is selling, or we'd be out of properties within 2 months or less of time across the board for the Greater Toronto area. Taking a look at Toronto proper, average sale price, $1,087,000, that's up 3%. Active listings up 30%, 5,579. Not a ton of active listings. Total number of sales down 8% at 2,308. Months of inventory, and keep in mind, this has been getting lower and lower. We're at 2.42 for Toronto. This chart, in my opinion, is the most important chart that we will go through and the one that tells the best story. Let's also discuss why those numbers this month can get skewed either way. Number of sales, 6,560 for the month of March 2024, the lowest we've seen in 15 years. If we take a look at March 2023, sales are down. But if we look at February of 2024, sales are up. And this is where we could spin this any way possible to make it look either bullish or bearish on the Toronto real estate market. If we look at year over year sales, that number is down. If we look at month over month, which is more of an indication of where we're at today, sales are up. And that could be on the positive side versus the bearish side. Now, looking compared to January of 2024, we're up about 50% the amount of sales, which is a significant jump in 2 months, even though it is one of the slowest Marches in a long time. Active listings, just under 12,500, the highest we've seen since November of last year. Months of inventory, and this is where we're watching how pricing typically functions. We saw back in October a high of 4.2 months of inventory, and that number crept lower and lower through the early start of this year and continues to get lower. Typically, what we saw last year is as the months of inventory starts to get lower, the average price starts to go up. And now looking at how months of inventory correlates with with pricing. As we start to get down into the 2 and 1 months of inventory, that's generally when we start to see the pricing increase. If we look at last year at March of 1.47 months of inventory, pricing was at about 1,108,000. What's notable about that number is that's pretty much where we were in February of 2024 of this year. And now we've jumped from 1,108,000 in February up to 1,100 and just over 20,000 in March. Still not where things were in April, but as you see the months of inventory creeping down from March, April, May of 2023, pricing went from 1.1 to almost 1.2 in May. In June of last year, the Bank of Canada raised rates by 0.25 on the overnight lending rate. And then they also did the same thing in July, which really put a halt on the real estate market. And inventory kept creeping up as sellers started getting their properties to the market at this time. As you can see that with the active listings increasing all the way from June into October. However, with rates where they were and the fixed rates also expensive, we saw pricing start to pull back there because it did cost more money to purchase the same property. Average days on market, we are seeing things pick up, and this is the first time we've been under 3 weeks since back in October. So definitely things are moving quicker, especially the more desirable properties are moving very fast right now, even within that 1 week time period, typically with an offer date, a lot quicker than we've seen in the past 6 months or so. Taking a look at the overnight lending rate, which has been at 5 for almost a year at this point, we're seeing pricing kind of hang in there in and around that 1.1 mark. It's now hit that 1.12 mark. This is where things were last year around this time, as the months kept going into the start of the year until those rate announcements started happening in June and July. Here's something that really stood out to me for the month of March when we use the benchmark pricing. And what we're going to see here is the gap difference between a condo and a detached property to purchase on the benchmark price. Typically, this number is anywhere between $800,000 and $1 million. And usually once we start hitting that $1 million mark, that's when we start to see some activity in condos pick up and the pricing in condos come up, because now the gap keeps getting bigger between freehold and condos. Typically, condos is what comes up. And you can see this a few times here as we take a look at past years, even going back into 2020. So here in December of 2020, the gap was give or take about 800,000. In August of 2021, we saw that gap closer to about 900,000. At the peak of February 2022, the gap at 1.2 million, give or take. But then take a look at December 2022, we saw that gap close again to about $800,000. In June, we did see that $1 million mark, and that's as we saw the pricing increase throughout the start of the year in 2023. But we did start to see condos pick up as well. Remember, June, July, that's when they raised the interest rates, as we just discussed. In January 2024, that gap was about 900,000, and now we've hit that $1 million mark, give or take, in March of 2024. What exactly does that mean? Well, typically, as the prices for detached semis and townhouses start to increase, condos are usually next in line. And as you can see on this chart, they usually all move in tandem, even though at different points. If condos are significantly cheaper than towns and semi-detached houses, for example, which is kind of that next step in the ladder, the buyers from those categories will typically go into a 2-bedroom or a bigger 2-bedroom condo. That's where taking a look at what that gap difference is in pricing is super important, because typically condos will follow suit. It just may take a little bit more time. But as we're seeing that now in the detached and semi market that have been super hot, and of course now townhouses are next in line. Now that that gap is $1 million, we are seeing condos start to get more activity. And as the inventory keeps compressing when it comes to condos, it may put pressure on pricing to start increasing. Overall, March was an interesting month due to those key factors of the March breaks and Easter. And I do feel that any sellers that were looking to get their properties on the market were waiting until after Easter to do so. Not to mention, a lot of the listings we've been seeing this week have been nicely polished and well staged, which means that those sellers have been prepping for some time to bring that property to the market. Interestingly enough, as I've been tracking the amount of listings that have come out this week, we're somewhere around that 10% mark of where the active listings finished for the month of March. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves along through the month of April. And if we do get a big flood of listings as the month continues, and as sellers start to see that pricing has been increasing in their area, it may prompt them to put the property on the market before waiting for those rates to drop. One sentiment I keep hearing on both buyers and seller side is that they will be waiting till rates drop in order to make a move. And that's totally acceptable. It really depends on your timing and what you feel is right for you. That being said, if you are a seller waiting for rates to drop, you may be in more competition with other sellers also waiting for rates to drop. We just saw this week. week, as there were many sellers waiting till after Easter to put their property on the market. Now, all of a sudden, in some areas and pockets that had maybe 1 or 2 listings through March, we saw 10 to 15 listings come up in this week alone in those certain pockets. Not every pocket is performing like that, but definitely not insignificant when it comes to the amount of properties on the market. Typically, the less properties available, the better it will be for the result of the sale of your house. If you're a buyer waiting for those rates to drop, there is a big pool of buyers also thinking the exact same thing. And fixed rates, as we've discussed many times in this channel, have been dropping on the back end. But if you're looking to wait until the Bank of Canada drops those rates even by 0.25, it may bring about another spurt of buyers coming to the markets. In one of my past videos, I talked about how the market in the future will probably be a little bit staggered. I do think that will be the case as we trend through the rest of the year. If you have any questions on what exactly is happening on the ground level as I'm working with buyers and sellers in today's market, definitely book a call or drop your comment down below on what you think we're going to see as we are now officially well on our way in the spring market. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.